Shipping costs going up again. On July 10th, I purchased a 1-ounce eBay standard envelope label and paid 78 cents. And the previous rate was 74 cents. Now, 4 cents doesn't sound like much. Most sellers aren't going to panic over 4 cents. And most buyers aren't going to even notice 4 cents. But when eBay's standard envelope launched in 2021, that same 1-ounce label cost 51 cents. And it's now 78 cents. That's an increase of approximately 53% in about 5 years. And that matters when your business is built around low-dollar trading cards. A 4-cent increase may not change the economics of a $100 card. It may not even change the economics of a $20 card. But what about a $1.99 card? What about a $2.49 card? What about sellers shipping thousands of inexpensive cards every year? At some point, postage increases stop being a minor operating expense and start changing which cards are worth listing, how we price them, and how we promote them, and whether the low-end card business still works at all. Today, we're going to talk about the real impact of shipping increases, how sellers can protect themselves, and how to recognize when it's time to change your business model. Welcome to my so-called card life, the podcast where we talk about what actually happens when you try to run a real card business, the decisions, adjustments, and lessons that don't show up in highlight reels. Welcome back to my so-called card life. This is episode 40, and today we're talking about shipping costs. The immediate reason for this conversation is the latest increase in eBay's standard envelope postage. I went back through my own shipping label history to confirm exactly when the charge appeared in my account. My 1-ounce labels increased from 74 to 78 cents, beginning with labels I purchased on July 10th. Now, this is a 4-cent increase, and if we only look at this individual increase, it's pretty easy to dismiss it. 4 cents is nothing, right? It's less than the sales tax on a cup of coffee, and it's an amount most of us would not bother picking up if we saw it lying in a parking lot. But looking at one increase in isolation misses the larger issue. Because when eBay standard envelope began in 2021, the 1-ounce rate was 51 cents. Today it's at 78 cents, and that's a 27-cent increase per shipment. If you look at 27 cents multiplied by 1,000 shipments, it's $270. At 5,000 shipments, it's $1,350. At 10,000 shipments, we're talking a $2,700 increase. And that's the first major point for this episode. Small cost increases become large expenses when they're multiplied by volume. Low-end card sellers depend on volume. We're not necessarily making 20, 50, or $100 on every transaction. We may be making a relatively small contribution on each individual sale and relying on hundreds or thousands of transactions to build the business. That means pennies matter. But there's another side to that argument. Sometimes sellers spend so much time worrying about pennies that they ignore dollars. They search for a cheaper envelope. They try to save half a cent on a penny sleeve. They reuse scraps of tape. They adjust a label to keep an envelope barely under 1 ounce. There's nothing wrong with controlling expenses. We should absolutely understand and manage our supply costs. But saving 2 cents on an envelope will not fix a business model that loses 50 cents every time a card sells. The purpose of this discussion is not to panic over 4 cents. It's to use that 4-cent increase as a reason to review the entire transaction. What did the buyer pay? What did eBay take? What did postage cost? What did the packaging cost? What did the card itself cost? How much labor did the order require? What's left over when that transaction is finished? Because that is the real story. If you enjoy this kind of hobby and reseller conversation, check out the Dollar Box live every other Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central. We go live with JC3 Cards and Collectibles and the Dollar Box to talk cards, reselling, eBay, whatnot, live selling, inventory strategy, and whatever chaos the hobby gives us that week. It is part hobby talk, part reseller discussion, and part live reaction to what is actually happening in the card market. You can catch the Dollar Box live every other Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time. One of the easiest mistakes in the low-end card business is confusing money collected with money earned. Suppose you sell a card for $2.49. You may look at that sale and think you just made $2.49, but really, you did not. Suppose the buyer also paid a shipping charge. That doesn't mean the shipping charge is profit either. eBay calculates its final value fee on the total transaction, including the item price, shipping, and applicable sales tax. There's also a per order fee. Then we purchase the shipping label, and we use an envelope, a penny sleeve, and some form of protection, a label, tape, and possibly some additional materials. Then there's the cost of acquiring the card. And finally, there's the labor involved in the transaction. You had to source the card, identify it, image it, create the listing, store it, and locate it after it's sold. Then you had to pack it and get it into the mail stream. And along the way, you also have to answer a buyer question, handle a delivery concern, or process a refund. Now, not every seller needs to assign an exact hourly labor rate to every card. That level of accounting may not be practical. But labor cannot be treated as completely free. This is especially important when someone says, I only paid a nickel for the card, so anything I sell it for is profit. Nope, that's not true. A low acquisition cost helps, but it does not eliminate the rest of the transaction. A sale can create positive cash flow and still be a poor use of your time, and that distinction matters. Positive cash flow means more money came in than immediately went out. A sustainable margin means enough remains to pay for overhead, compensate your labor, absorb mistakes, and contribute to the growth of the business. Those are not the same thing. A seller can have a busy day, ship 30 orders, and generate positive feedback, and still have a weak financial result. Activity can feel like success, and shipping volume can feel like success. Sales volume definitely feels like success, but the number of envelopes leaving your house is not the same as profitability. The goal is not to ship the greatest possible number of cards. The goal is to build transactions that make sense. Shipping increases affect every seller. They don't affect every card equally. If I sell a $100 card and postage increases by 4 cents, that increase is almost irrelevant to the transaction. But if I sell a $2 card, 4 cents represents a much larger percentage of the available margin. And that's why very low dollar sellers feel postal increases first. Consider a 1-ounce ESE label at 78 cents. On a $100 sale, that postage would represent less than 1% of the item price. Although it is important to note a $100 card would not qualify for ESE. On a $10 sale, 78 cents represents 7.8%. On a $5 sale, represents 15.6%. And on a $2.49 sale, it represents a whopping 31%. And that's only the label. It doesn't include eBay fees, your packaging expenses, the card cost, or the labor that goes into it. Now, that doesn't automatically mean a $2.49 sale is unprofitable. The exact result depends on the shipping amount you collected, your store subscription fees, your fee structure, your cost basis, your supplies, and the way you process orders. But it shows why inexpensive cards have so little room for error. Now, a seller might say, I'll just increase the card from $2.49 to $2.53. And technically, that could recover the latest 4-cent increase before considering fees. But buyers don't shop that way. They compare the complete offer against other available copies. They consider the item price, the shipping charge, seller reputation, card condition, images, and delivery expectations. You can't assume every added expense can be passed directly to the buyer without affecting conversion. At the same time, absorbing every increase forever is also not a strategy. Eventually, the seller reaches a point where the original price no longer supports the transaction. And this is how margins disappear. Usually, they don't disappear in one dramatic event. They disappear gradually. Postage increases by 4 cents. Envelopes cost another penny. Card savers become more expensive. Platform fees increase. Promoted listings costs increase. The seller offers another 5% discount to maintain sales. Each individual change looks manageable. Then 2 years later, the seller is completing the same amount of work for significantly less money. Shipping costs rarely destroy a good business overnight. They erode it a few cents at a time. Whenever postage increases, sellers begin debating free shipping. Some sellers say free shipping is essential because buyers prefer it. Other sellers say the buyer should always pay the shipping charge. The truth is that the buyer pays for shipping one way or another. The only question is where the cost appears. With free shipping, the seller builds the expected shipping expense into the item price. With buyer paid shipping, the item price and shipping amount appear separately. With combined shipping, the buyer generally pays more for the first item and a reduced amount, or nothing at all, for extra items. None of those models make postage disappear. Free shipping can make a listing look cleaner, can also simplify the buyer's comparison when competing listings have different shipping charges. But free shipping has a major weakness for low dollar cards. The cost is hidden inside every individual listing. If postage rises and you don't update the item price, you absorb the increase. If you have 20,000 or 30,000 active listings, changing the embedded shipping amount across the entire store can be a significant task. Buyer paid shipping makes the expense more visible and allows the seller to change one business policy rather than repricing thousands of individual cards. But it can also create sticker shock. A buyer may be willing to pay $2.99 delivered for a card. That same buyer may react differently to a listing showing a $1.99 card plus $1 shipping. Economically, those offers are identical. Psychologically, they can feel different. The best model depends on your inventory and your customer behavior. A seller specializing in unique, scarce, or higher dollar cards may be able to charge shipping without much resistance. But a seller competing on common cards with dozens of identical copies available may find shipping presentation much more important. My preference is not to treat free shipping as automatically good or buyer paid shipping as automatically bad. The correct question is, does the structure produce a sustainable delivered price while encouraging the buyer behavior I want? For a low end store, I want buyers purchasing more than one card. That means my shipping and promotional structure should reward basket building. A model that produces thousands of single card $2 orders may generate impressive sales counts, but it can create a difficult workload and weak margins. The structure should not merely make one cheap card attractive. It should encourage the buyer to keep shopping. The strongest protection against higher shipping costs is not necessarily charging more for shipping. It's placing more revenue into each shipment. I call this order density. How many cards are in the order? How much revenue is being carried by that envelope? And how much gross margin is being supported by that postage label? A 1 ounce envelope carrying one inexpensive card and a 2 ounce envelope carrying 7 cards may not be dramatically different in postage cost, but the economic value of those two orders can be completely different. Let's use a simplified example. Suppose one buyer purchases a single $2.49 card and the postage label costs 78 cents. The postage alone equals more than 31% of the item price. Now suppose another buyer purchases 7 cards with a total selling price of $10, and the order requires a 2-ounce label. Even if the 2-ounce label costs more than $1, postage represents a much smaller percentage of the overall transaction. There are more item fees to consider, and the exact margin depends on the discount and cost basis. But the shipment has more revenue to support the fulfillment expense. This is why multi-card promotions matter. They're not simply discounts, they're logistics tools. They're shipping efficiency tools. They're average order value tools. At JC3, our Lucky 7 promotion encourages a buyer to select 7 or more eligible cards and receive a substantial discount. At first glance, someone may look at a 40% discount and think we're giving away too much margin. But that analysis would be incomplete. Without the promotion, some of those cards may not sell at all, or they may sell individually over several months, requiring 7 separate labels, 7 envelopes, 7 pulls, and 7 packing sessions. With the promotion, we can move 7 cards in one transaction. We pay eBay's per order charge once instead of across 7 separate orders. We use one envelope, we print one label, and we perform one fulfillment process. The buyer receives a much better delivered value. The promotion helps transform low-dollar inventory from a single card business into a basket business. Now, that does not mean every multi-card discount is profitable. You still need to know your cost basis and your net return. A poorly designed discount can increase sales while reducing total profit, but the core principle remains. The more profitable response to a postage increase may not be raising the shipping charge by 4 cents. It may be increasing the average number of cards per order. If order density is the defense, how do we create it? Well, the first method is combined shipping. The buyer should understand that the first card carries most of the shipping expense, and additional cards ship at a reduced cost. This gives them a reason to search your store rather than complete the transaction immediately. This second method is with volume pricing. That could be a quantity discount within a listing, a coded coupon, a sale event, or a multi-item promotion. The structure of that should be easy to understand. A promotion that requires the buyer to perform advanced mathematics is not an effective promotion. Buy 7 and save 40% is very clear. But buy 4 from this category and 3 from another category, excluding certain price points, and receive 17% off the second lowest item is not a very clear message. The third method is inventory depth. You can't generate multi-card orders if buyers can't find multiple cards they want. This is one reason focused inventory can outperform random inventory. If someone finds one Jordan Love card in my store, what else can I offer? Do I have additional Jordan Love cards? Do I have Green Bay Packers cards? Do I have other quarterbacks from the same set? Do I have inserts and parallels at similar price points? If someone finds a Star Wars card, do I have enough Star Wars inventory to keep that buyer browsing? Or if someone finds a My Little Pony character, do I have other characters from the same release? Inventory depth creates natural baskets. The fourth method is store organization. Categories, searchable titles, and consistent listing practices help buyers locate related inventory. A fifth method is communication. Your listings, your store banner, your promotional graphics and packing materials. They can tell buyers that combined orders are encouraged. You should not assume buyers will discover every promotion on their own. Sometimes they need a little help. The sixth method is pricing consistency. If 5 similar cards are priced at wildly different levels without an obvious reason, the buyer may lose confidence or stop building the order. The goal is to create an environment where adding another card feels both easy and valuable. The seller who can consistently place 5, 7, or 10 cards into one shipment is better positioned to survive postage increases, better than a seller dependent on one card transactions. eBay's standard envelope is a tremendous tool for the trading card business. It gives sellers a low cost option with limited tracking and shipping protection for eligible items. Without ESE, many low dollar cards would not be practical to sell individually online. But ESE has limits. The shipment must meet weight, size, and flexibility requirements. It must fall within an eligible category. And there are also limits on the transaction value. When a shipment no longer qualifies for ESE, the seller may have to move to USPS Ground Advantage or another package service. That creates what I like to call the Ground Advantage cliff. On one side of the cliff, you may have costs around a few dollars. Then on the other side, it can cost almost up to $10. That difference creates a difficult middle market. A card may be too valuable for ESE, but not valuable enough for the buyer to comfortably absorb package shipping. A thick memorabilia card may sell for only a few dollars, but require a bubble mailer because it cannot move through the envelope system safely. A low dollar graded card may need a package. A large multi card order may exceed the practical capacity of ESE. The seller then faces several choices: charge the buyer the full ground advantage amount, absorb some of the shipping cost, increase the item price, or combine the card into a larger lot. Or maybe decide that the item does not make sense as an individual online listing to begin with. This is where sellers need to think in terms of delivered market value. Suppose a card is worth approximately $12. If the buyer must pay $5 in shipping, the delivered cost is $17. Can the market support a $17 delivered price? Maybe. If the card is scarce and the buyer specifically wants it, shipping may not prevent the sale. But if several copies are available for 13 or 14 delivered, your nominal $12 valuation does not matter. The market is based on what the buyer must pay to receive the card. That's why a $20 ESE eligible card can sometimes be easier to sell profitably than a slightly more expensive card requiring package service. The higher price card may produce less net value once the shipping method changes. Every seller should identify these cliffs within their own inventory. Which cards repeatedly require more expensive shipping? Which categories produce awkward packaging? Which transactions create poor delivered value? Then decide whether those items need higher prices, buyer paid shipping, larger lots, or a different sales channel. This may be the most important adjustment low end sellers need to make. Not every card deserves its own eBay listing. Now, that statement can be difficult for inventory focused sellers. We look at a card and think, someone may want this, and that may be true. But demand alone does not make the listing economically worthwhile. We need to consider the complete life cycle of the card. How much time will it take to identify? How much time will it take to image? How much time will it take to list? How long will it occupy storage? And how difficult will it be to locate after it sells? What shipping method will it require? And what's the likely net result? If a card is likely to sell for $1.49 after sitting for 2 years, it may not deserve the same individual processing as a card expected to sell for $15 next week. There are other options. The card can become part of a player lot, or it can become part of a team lot. It can be grouped with cards from the same set, or it can go into a character lot, a franchise lot, or a themed lot. It can be placed in a dollar box at a card show. It can become promotional inventory. It can be used as a bonus card. It can be sold as part of a bulk deal. It can remain unlisted until there is enough related inventory to build a stronger offering. Lots are especially important when package shipping is required. Shipping one $3 card through Ground Advantage is usually difficult to justify. Shipping a $25 lot containing 10 related cards may create a much better value for both the seller and the buyer. The market often focuses on the potential maximum selling price of each card, but maximizing the gross price of every individual card does not always maximize the return on your time. Sometimes the best business decision is to accept a lower per card selling price while moving more inventory in one transaction. That's not giving inventory away. It's recognizing that fulfillment has a cost. Every seller should have some concept of a minimum viable transaction. It doesn't have to be the same for everyone. A hobby seller processing a few orders at night may accept a different return than a full-time business with employees and a commercial space. A seller with an acquisition cost of 1 cent per card has different flexibility than a seller paying $1 per card. And a seller with highly automated listing and fulfillment systems may operate efficiently at a lower price point. But every seller has a floor, whether they have calculated it or not. The minimum viable transaction begins with the total amount collected. Then subtract the marketplace fees, subtract postage, subtract supplies, and subtract the acquisition cost. Account for expected returns, losses, and refunds. Then consider labor and overhead. What remains? Is that amount worth completing the transaction? Do not make the mistake of setting a price floor based only on the card's market value. The card may be worth $1 according to recent sales, but that does not mean it's profitable for you to sell at $1. The market value of the card and the economic value of the transaction are different questions. This is also why sellers should be careful when copying their competitors. The competing seller may have a lower acquisition cost. They may also use a different shipping model. And they may accept a lower labor return. They may have a massive pick and pack system. And they may be intentionally liquidating inventory. They may not even know their own numbers. The fact that another seller lists a card for 99 cents with free shipping does not prove that 99 cents is a sustainable price. It proves only that someone created the listing. Your minimum viable transaction should be based on your operation. At JC3, our standard individual listing floor has generally been higher than many low-end competitors because we do not want to depend on isolated $1 sales. Lower priced inventory serves a different purpose. It helps create selection. It builds larger orders. And it supports promotions like our Lucky 7 promotion. It can produce a good return when multiple cards move together. And that distinction is important. A $1.99 card may be poor inventory when sold alone. The same card may be valuable when it helps complete a 7-card order. The card hasn't changed, but its role in the transaction has changed. At what point should a seller actually make changes? Well, the first warning sign is when postage becomes an excessive percentage of order revenue. There's no universal percentage that applies to every business, but if postage regularly consumes 25, 30, or 40% of the amount collected, that deserves attention. The second warning sign is a high volume of isolated low dollar orders. A large sales count may disguise weak average order value. Review how many buyers purchase one card compared with multiple cards. The third warning sign is that a postage increase creates immediate anxiety. If a 4-cent increase threatens the viability of a large percentage of your transactions, the margin was already extremely thin. A fourth warning sign is fulfillment fatigue. Are you spending every night packing a large number of orders while feeling that the financial result doesn't match the workload? Well, that may indicate that the business is generating activity instead of value. A fifth warning sign is inventory growth without meaningful profit growth. You may be listing more cards, storing more cards, and shipping more cards without improving the final return. And a sixth warning sign is relying on future volume to repair current losses. Sellers sometimes say, I lose a little on each sale, but I make it up in volume. That doesn't work unless the additional volume creates some other economic advantage. More unprofitable transactions generally produce a larger loss. Volume helps when it creates efficiency. For example, one multi-card order may be more efficient than 7 individual orders, but multiplying a weak single card transaction does not automatically improve it. When any of these warning signs appear, there are several possible changes. You can increase the minimum individual listing price. You can raise the amount charged for the first item shipping. Or you could reduce or eliminate additional card shipping charges to encourage larger baskets. Maybe create a volume promotion or build lots. Move marginal inventory to card shows or stop sourcing cards that don't fit the model. Change packaging where it can be done safely. Review promoted listing rates and review supply costs. Maybe remove stale inventory that creates storage and management work without producing meaningful sales. The correct response is rarely one dramatic change. It's usually a combination of smaller adjustments. After spending this episode explaining why shipping increases matter, I also want to make the opposite point. Don't overreact. One 4-cent increase does not necessarily justify repricing your entire store overnight. It doesn't automatically mean ESE is no longer viable. And it doesn't mean low-end card selling is dead. At 78 cents, eBay Standard Envelope remains one of the most important tools available to low-dollar card sellers. Without it, the lowest end of the online singles market would be far more difficult. The proper response is analysis, not panic. Look at the effect across your actual volume. If you ship 100 1-ounce ESE orders per month, the latest 4-cent increase adds approximately $4 per month. That alone probably does not require a major business overhaul. If you ship 5,000 1-ounce ESE orders per month, the same increase represents approximately $200 per month. Now that deserves a little more attention. But even then, the answer may not be raising every price by 4 cents. A small improvement in average order size could offset the increase. A modest reduction in promoted listing expense could also offset it. A better supply purchase could offset part of it. Eliminating a handful of consistently unprofitable transaction types could also offset it. The historical increase is more important than the latest individual increase. The 1 ounce ESE rate has gone from 51 cents at launch to 78 cents today. That's approximately 53%. The lesson is not that sellers failed because they did not react to 1 4-cent adjustment. The lesson is that businesses must periodically revisit assumptions. A price that worked in 2021 may not work in 2026. A free shipping structure created 3 years ago may no longer recover its costs. A minimum listing price that once produced a good return may now be too low. Business models are not permanent. They have to change as expenses, platforms, and buyer behaviors change. Shipping costs are not the most exciting part of the card business. Nobody begins selling cards because they are passionate about envelope weights, label prices, or postal regulations. But fulfillment is where the sale becomes real. It's also where a surprising amount of profit can disappear. The latest 1 ounce eBay standard envelope rate is 78 cents in my account, up from 74 cents. The larger story is that same service began at 51 cents in 2021, and that's a 53% increase. For higher dollar cards, that increase may be relatively easy to absorb, but for low dollar inventory, it changes the math. Forces us to examine whether individual listings still make sense, or whether our shipping charges recover our true costs, and whether our promotions are building profitable orders or simply generating more work. Really, the best defense against the higher postage is not always a higher shipping charge. It may be a larger order, or it may be a deeper inventory, maybe combined shipping or volume promotion. Maybe moving a card into a lot instead of listing it individually. And sometimes the correct decision is admitting that a card doesn't belong online as a single. Know what you collect, know what you sell, and know what it costs to complete the transaction. And don't allow a growing sales count to hide a shrinking margin. The low-end card business can still work, but it works best when inexpensive cards are used to create valuable orders, not when every inexpensive card is expected to carry the full cost of a transaction by itself. I want to thank you all for listening to episode 40 of My So-Called Card Life. Till next time, keep collecting, keep selling, and keep learning. And keep building your own so-called card life.